This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, fantastic. The only reason I hold my breath there is we had a problem with the last webinar that we ran, and we couldn't get the record to work. So thanks, Viola. That's fantastic. In terms of if you have any questions, then you'll see on the top right-hand corner of the screen there is a little speech bubble. If you click on that, then you'll be able to type in messages and ask us questions. Ask us questions as we're going along. We have actually planned to run this for about half an hour and then have Q&A at the end. But if you have questions as we go through, then that's good too. We'll try and squeeze them in if that's right, if that works. I've got this set, so every time somebody comes into the room, it pings. So that's why got my head dinging like this. So we'll just leave it for another minute or so as some more people join us. I'm not sure whether you have all seen the little books that we've been creating. Do you know what? Let's just ask you all to, if you've seen the little book series that we're creating, would you mind just typing into your right hand chat box, just say yes or no, followed by the name of the one you've seen, if that's not too complicated, just as the last couple of people come into the room. This was an idea pre-COVID of creating some little mini books to help you guys in your world of using technology for learning. And the first one was induction. I can see a couple of people there have seen the webinar one, and Gaelle has written the little book of virtual classrooms for us. And so what we will do at the end of this is, first of all, we'll send you a copy of the recording as we're recording. We'll also send you a copy of the slides, and then we'll also send you a link so you can download the little book of virtual classrooms, which is very much a practical hints and tips to help you in your world of running webinars and running virtual classrooms. Fantastic, look at that. Rosie's put a link straight into the chat room so you can download it. And I was quite excited about this because we created them as Kindle books, because everybody seems to use Kindle. We also created them as PDFs, which looks as if that's the biggest download. But because I'm an absolute Apple addict, we've also created them as iBooks. So if you use an iPhone or an iPad, they're brilliant. They just then sit there within your book shelf. Right, that's enough from me. I'm going to pass over to Gaelle. Gaelle is, I described Gaelle earlier as the expert in running virtual classrooms, so not putting any pressure on you whatsoever. If everybody would like to certainly mute themselves and set, if you look at the top and you can set your view, I would either set it for who's talking or active cameras, and then it reduces that space. And if you're not actually speaking, might be an idea just to turn off your camera. So, Gaelle, I'm going to hand over this virtual microphone to you, and I'm going to shut up and let you let you welcome everybody to the room. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Martin. And yes, indeed, thank you for having me and welcome everybody. I'm delighted to be here today. Although I'm going to talk about the virtual classroom, this is not a virtual classroom. This is a webinar, so it's slightly different. And I was very excited to maybe trial a couple of things, but GoToMeeting doesn't allow us. So it is going to be a proper webinar. And if you have any questions, please populate the chat. Martin will monitor it and we will take them as they go. This session is for you, and I would like you to have the most benefit out of it. Maybe a little bit about me, because you may wonder what my experience, my relevance is on the topic. I'm actually not a technical person whatsoever. I got my law degree from a middle town in south of France, so no technology involved whatsoever in my education. I came to the UK in 2005 to improve my English for 6 months. Just for record, I'm still living in Surrey at the moment, so it was a long 6 months. And my first job was a conference manager for IT security topic, and my boss at the time was a visionary and decided we should do webinars. So it was 2006, and even for the IT industry, it was hairy-fairy, to say the least. Everything that could possibly go wrong was going wrong every session. So I took a little bit the hatred of the webinars, and my not so love for GoTo come from that, because we were using GoTo at the time. Anyway, fast forward a few years, I've now moved on to L&D, and I work for membership organizations in building and property and the credit crunch hit. And because of this webinar experience, I was tasked to actually find a way to do CPD for members. And that's what I'm going to talk a little bit at some point, my experience, because it's probably the most relevant for most of you. Anyway, so that was the 2007, 2008. Since then, I've probably trained over 250 trainers. One of my projects got an e-learning awards for best use of the virtual classroom. And I think the biggest number of sessions I run was in 2012, 2013. It was over 200. So 200 sessions plus 200 rehearsal plus prepping the trainer and reviewing the slide. It was a busy year. And my favorite technology for virtual training, and it's different from webinars, but I think Adobe and WebEx are the best suited for virtual training. They enable a much more interesting instructional design. However, sometimes you just have to do with what you have, and I will talk about it at some point. So just for my own curiosity and to understand where you are at, I would like you to tell me if you're already having webinars or virtual training already, you're doing them, or if you're more like at a stage where you're scoping what you can and cannot do. So it's going to just give me an idea, and maybe Martin can summarize it in a couple of minutes to me to see, you know, what what you're doing. So someone says both. Okay, so you're already doing both. That's brilliant. You're using Teams. Some of you are using Teams. Okay, brilliant. Okay, yeah, interesting. We're going to look at the difference between, and I'm going to touch about the difference between webinars and virtual training. Absolutely. Well, today, first of all, I would like us to talk a little bit about why and when live virtual training is the right choice. Because it's not always. And then we'll talk a little bit about the processes, but I will not necessarily go into the step-by-step of the different processes, because it's something that I was covered in depth in the virtual, in the little book of virtual training. So that's not probably something I will probably be a little bit lighter on, but if you've got specific questions, feel free to pop them in the chat. And then we're also going to look at the technology and how they can be combined. So the question is, why live online training? And someone popped in the chat saying, "Oh, I don't understand the difference between a webinar and a virtual training." So first, we've got various options, okay, when we look at digital. So we can do video tutorial, we can do blog, we can do games, we can do e-learnings, you know, the e-learnings that, you know, self-studies, we can do social learning, and then you can have virtual classroom and webinar. So how do you split them, I would say? So how do you make your choice? And I think that probably a little bit, you know, for me, what's the key of the of what needs to be achieved, that is it active? If it's a virtual training, it needs to be active learning. So compared to a webinar like today, where we've got 35 people, for me, a virtual training will have top max 20 people. Why? Because they're going to have to work together. They're going to have to brainstorm. They're going to have to work together on a virtual flip chart. They're going to have to do case studies. They're going to have to find solutions. They're going to have to do practice. And you can't do that with a large group. If it's a large group like us today, with a subject matter expert pushing content out, it's more a webinar. And then to just give you a little bit of idea, if you're a little bit unsure about how you're going to manage it, there's a couple of elements to take into considerations. First is, what are we trying to achieve? Is it technical, like is it technical knowledge and information, so that's the left-hand side, or are we looking at behavior changes and problem solving? So technical knowledge and information is probably it's probably something that we do a lot. You know, we do a lot, and that's probably better suited for webinars. You can do quiz, you can do like something that's a little bit on volume rather than small group. The moment you look at looking more at transforming skills, then you have to look at something where it's going to take a little bit more time. We have to just be honest. It is not in 30 minutes on a quick webinar that you're going to make someone become, you know, from, you know, a junior executive into a manager. So we have to actually look at, this aspect. There is an element of time. There is an element of structure that you find in virtual training. Oh, there is a slight echo. So now also you need to combine. If your learner's time is an issue, maybe virtual training is not the best option. And you may want to probably look at more at social learning, something that's spread over time anyway, but that will not be as taxing in terms of making a time commitment. So we have to look at different options here. But there is a very strong benefits on using live online training. Can someone tell me what is this super, really great benefits and it's not cost? Can someone just tell me in the chat what is the really ultimate added benefits of using live online training?
Cost.
Cost is one of them, but it is not the main one. I mean, in terms of instructional benefits. Time.
Reaching.
Sorry, say that again. Reach. Yes, reach is one of them. The participant, the engagement. You're right. There is an element of that, all of that. But the one is the ultimate benefit is spread out the learning. When you do a face-to-face course, it's really hard to ask people to come back once a week for a couple of hours, right? Whether if you do a virtual training, it's actually something that you can possibly do. So, you have a program that lasts a month or 3 weeks, it comes once a week for 2 hours and they've got assignment. And by spreading the learning, spending more time thinking about it at work and how to implement things in the workplace or in a real cases, you actually have more chances to have a real impact. You can blend it with a variety of other tools, and very simple. A learning journals can be a Word document that you post onto a LinkedIn group. It doesn't have to be sophisticated. When I said blended, it doesn't mean you having an LMS. If you have one, it's great. But if you just functions with a LinkedIn group or a Facebook group with posting document, asking people to download something or upload information, it works all the same. And it is really, I would say, the power of the virtual training. So virtual training in a nutshell is probably a little bit longer than a webinar because they're going to have to have practice, and it is also a little bit it's less people and more time invested and more structure. Now, getting the right setup, we all feel like virtual training is about technology, and I will tell you it is more about the human. All the parties involved have to find a way to communicate and be natural about themselves. And they've got a lot of fears, particularly trainer. There is still a little bit of an echo somewhere. So I'm not sure where it's coming from. So anyway, so understanding the human, your trainers might have fears. And I mean, we're in post-COVID mode, so a lot of people are much more comfortable about their, being on webcam and being in a virtual room, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they're comfortable delivering their session.
Sorry, Gaelle, let me just jump in. Sorry, I think we've got somebody who's dialed in, and can we just ask them to put their microphone onto mute because it's starting to overtake the session. It's a bit.
Thank you. I think it's Briganti. Yeah, perfect. Thank you. So yes, understanding the human. So your learners, how you're going to make them engage. Your trainers, how you're going to make them engage the learners in a virtual environment where our default mode and our representation is a webinar like this one, and set expectation for everybody. And I guess that's where the challenge is. Beyond technology, it is about the people involved on all sides. And it's about making them understand that it is first and foremost about, it's not a webinar. And I think Nicola said it, they don't call their virtual training, they call them live online or virtual class, or we used to call them in one of my web classes. We don't call them webinars, because the moment you said webinars, it makes participants think that they can sit and do their emails without vaguely listening. So make sure you're strong on the technical requirement, and I will touch on it at the end of the sessions. Make sure they're prepared for interaction. So, if they need to be able to talk, and once again, it's easier than it was. Switch on their webcam, be focused, be active, understand how to use the tools. They committed to it. Okay, you don't arrive half an hour late to drop half an hour early, because then you skew up all the group activities. If there's like pairs activities or triad activity organized, it just doesn't work if you've got people dropping in and dropping out. So it has to be very clear and instructed. Set expectation. It's interactive. And sanction. I mean, if it's a longer program, if it's a standalone session, then the sanctions, is just fine. You just don't get what you're getting. But if it's like a multiple sessions program, if you miss the sessions, what's going to happen? So maybe you have to evidence that you've watched the recording, or you've done, pardon me, an activity to catch up with what you have, so you're at the same level and you don't delay your breakout activity. So these kind of things have to be verbalized and communicated. And the outcome eventually, if you can make it a certificate, if you can have an element of reward attached to a virtual training, it's great. It's a great incentive. Like just homemade certificates, like Charity Learning Consortium virtual training on delivering webinars. Just this piece of paper is special. It's meant you feel like you've achieved something. Just a little bit about how I went about it, and I just mentioned that in my experience, where we're really pushed to go on to volume, it was because of the credit crunch, and we have to actually create something accessible, affordable, and quite quickly. So probably a time frame that is a situation that's fairly similar, although different to what we are today. And we actually, what we thought about and think is, first we decided to create a framework. So all our sessions, we thought about what would be best for our learners. Our learners were all fun on site because they're in the building industry and construction world. So they would normally come in the office in the morning, look at the schedule for the day. So the best time to get them was 9 o'clock. So we did the session 9 till 10:30, always. And it was 90 minutes because in 90 minutes, you can use some breakout room quite easily. You can actually sit a little bit and not just do an information push. And it's not too long that it's eating too much into the day. So that was the way we formalize it. We eventually, because we had an LMS, a Moodle LMS, we went for integration with the LMS. But I think it's not necessary. And we had like a fairly low cost. As a project manager, I trained the trainers, all of them, convinced them that it was a good idea, which today is easy. At the time, it wasn't necessarily. We also had a lot of work done on the slides, because slides for the virtual classroom are not slides for face-to-face. You can't have 10 bullet points with 6 words per bullet point. It will not be readable. And it's something that's hard to communicate. It has to be. Also, we're spending so much time in front of a screen that if your slides are dull and boring, especially now, it's an energy drain. You have to make sure that it's visual, it's help people, it's lift them up a little bit, otherwise they're going to switch off. And my role was also a producer, so I was operating the technology for the group. And I've learned a lot doing this, and I've done it. What I do now is very different, but at the time I had conversation with the trainer. And so you can train your trainers as a group, but you can also have a one-to-one conversation with them, and that works quite well. A more bespoke approach. So they understand the room, they understand the tools individually. Then they create slides. And what I would always do is review the slides, because a subject matter expert is not a trainer. So if you work with trainer, they will probably put a little bit of effort in, thinking of the learner's best interest. A subject matter expert will think about the content and how to push it. So I would normally rework the slide, create the interaction, so breakout room, whiteboard, polls, anything that make the participants think, make them think about solving their own problem, making actions. Then we would have a practice sessions. I would overload the interaction, so I would guarantee that we still would have about one every 5-10 minutes, even if they take out 1/3 of the interactions that I've suggested. We make some last changes and we practice. I had a one-on-one relationship with all the trainer. That was great. But because I sat in every single session, I also had a one-on-one interaction with the learners. You know, some of them kept coming back, the candidates, the people. And that's definitely created something of a community feeling, which is quite important. It's definitely work well once again when you create a human element to it, and it's harder when you have to create volume quickly because you have to let go a little bit, but there is definitely a benefits in creating. So in 2011 when we started, we have 60 sessions. By 2013 we're running 250 sessions, including professional certificates. We normally cap the sessions at 15. And even though it was a low-cost program, and maybe it's different for you, but as a membership organization, it was quite important. It was still quite profitable. So it actually eats all the market at the time. So just a little bit on the planning front is you have to really get starting on having a bit of a vision. Because if you have a bit of a vision and you can put it on paper, it's easier to communicate to your learners, to the trainers, to anybody who is involved in communicating. So I don't know, marketing team or internal L&D people. They need to have a clear review about the length, the format, how to connect, what the impact, how it is going to be evaluated, the cost, and obviously the reward. And I'm going to come to it in a minute. As I said, the length for us, I think it's quite important that, you don't go with some sessions are an hour, then the next week you've got sessions that are an hour and a half, then all of a sudden you start delivering 3 hours sessions. First 3 hour session is long, let's face it. But also, it has to be an element of consistency for the learners to actually know what's happening. We're already out of our comfort zone when we're actually joining a virtual training, because we don't know, what our reference to learning is a classroom, like we've been at school, then at uni, and it's our learning reference. It's harder to position yourself in a virtual training still. I'm sure in a year time or 2 years time, it will be different. But at the moment, it's a certain element of consistency would definitely help your learners to feel more comfortable. Consistency in the way that you welcome people, in the length, in the format, in a variety of things, the tools that you use. Don't start with, don't have maybe the short session with GoTo and then the longer session with WebEx. It's very disturbing because then you have to acclimate as your learners again to different groups. Different tools, sorry. So that's a little bit on the on framing the number of sessions and so on. And then the reward. Whenever you can, as I said, have a certification, a badge, an official validations, I don't know, a group pictures from the screen and you post it onto your intranet or anything you use, just to acknowledge the fact that some people went to gain skills into online. And the reason, because I'm insisting quite a lot about it, is that digital learning have normally the biggest dropout. If you look at MOOCs, for example, and I'm sure we all sign up for a MOOC program, and some of us have finished the first module, some of us not even. Very little have completed the entire program. So the moment you start having a longer program, you have to make sure that you put everything in place to create a motivation and incentive to complete it, because it does take time. And that's probably the flip chart of this spread out learning. There is an element of time that's going to have to be taken out on a regular basis to attend the course. And it's going to have to fit between a busy professional life and a busy personal life, especially at the moment. So it has to be worth it. Absolutely. And then there is evaluation. And yes, you can do an evaluation, and probably you should. Could you connect? That's a good start. Could you connect and did you like your trainer? That's great, but that's absolutely not enough. You have to really assess that the right level of skills have been reached. So whether you ask if it's knowledge based, you can do quizzes, absolutely, or test, but if it's about behavioral transformations, you might have to do something slightly different, like an interview or a case study, or maybe have use other tools that are available to actually evaluate the skill gap has been breached, and whether it's interview with manager. And it's also a function of resources, and some of you are just like, this woman is out of her mind if she thinks we've got time to organize interview with all the managers of all the learners that we're doing. Probably, but there needs to be an element of evaluation. And even if you don't put it into place, you have to think about, in an ideal world, how you would evaluate the output. Maybe it will not be feasible to do it in all the cases, but it is key to the success. Otherwise, how do you know it was worth the investment in the first place? So I would say that getting it right, and you may not get it right straight from the start, but as long as you've got clear objectives why you're going for a virtual training rather than a webinar or a social learning experience, then you're already on the right step. If it's to bridge skills, look at competencies, clear views definitely work. Based on those objectives, once you define the format, so regular length of time, regularity, frequency, then you've got a winning solutions. Okay, it's obviously about the quality of the presenter, the interaction, the way it's designed. But as long as you're clear on what you want to achieve, then you are ready for the next step. And I bring the technology at the end for two reasons. Don't start with the technology in mind, except if you already have a technology in-house, in which case don't ask yourself any other questions. If it's available, then use it. It may not be the best options for training, but if it's there for the first year until you solidify the skills and see that it works, use it. So for me, training technology are Adobe, GoTo, WebEx, and Zoom. And the reason for that is that they've got breakout rooms. Now, I know some of you will jump in the chat and said, but Microsoft Teams got breakout rooms. Well, they've got subgroups. Let's put it this way: you can create subgroups. Is it really functioning? I mean, for me, supporting external training provider, it just doesn't work. Internally, it could work. I do think it's quite limited still. It may change, but on Teams it actually have an interactive training. I'm not quite sold yet. And so for virtual trainings mean collaborative tools. It means breakout rooms. Absolutely. It means whiteboard where participants can brainstorm idea, answer solutions, debrief. It's quite essential. And that's the difference between a webinar. It's another key difference between a webinar and a virtual training. So if you've got any of those in-house, then don't go any further. It might be that some of them are, Adobe, for example, use a lot of bandwidth and it's still flash-based, so it's not accessible for some people. WebEx is seriously dated. I will not say otherwise. It looks dated, but it's got some really good instructional potential. And Zoom, well, Zoom is great. It uses little bandwidth, but we also know that it's got security issues, and some of us are quite aware of it because they've experienced it firsthand. So there is not a perfect solutions. So sometimes we just have to go with what's already available, what works for you, and what financially works for all of us. Now, in terms of process, you need to make sure your participants join. And I've gone into much more detail in the little book, so you will probably find a bit more information there. But you need to make very sure that the different group of participants, so first the trainer and the host, know how to join with best practice, and the participants as well. So for the trainer, the host, obviously they need to have impeccable audio, immaculate audio, that's the key, and they need to be on a webcam as well. For this, they need to have a stable internet. So not only they need a computer, but they need also to have a cable internet going from their computer to their router. So that also prevents them from using a tablet, because tablets are on Wi-Fi, so less stable. And they also need to do like Martin and I, to have a headset with a mic. It prevents echoes, but also it allows the presenter to hear even someone who's got a poor audio internet connection, therefore audio connection. So it is basically the tool that needs to be in place for someone to start. Now, for an attendee, it's pretty similar, except that you've got little control. So you can advise them to wear a headset. That's normally help everybody, especially if you're having breakout rooms, to be on a computer rather than a tablet, and to close down all the apps. But at the end of the day, there is little you can do to enforce it. And if they have a bad experience because they haven't read the instructions, well, sometimes you just have to face the what it really means. So we are nearing the end of the time that I have to share my experience with you, and I want to make sure that I can answer some of your questions, because I realize that it's quite a short amount of time and there is so much to cover. So just to look back at what we said, is that really start with what you want to achieve for your learners. Start with this. So you know the why of why you're going virtual training. Based on this outcome, define a format, whether it's 90 minutes, 60 minutes, 30 minutes, then build on the instructions and the processes for everybody involved, and then fit in the technology around that and not the other way around. So that's pretty much for me what I wanted to cover today. So why and when live virtual training is the right choice. So hopefully you feel like we've covered this. We looked a little bit at the processes, but briefly, because once again, it's in the little book of virtual training. And we look at the technologies that can be used in virtual training. So it's key to be a virtual training to have a breakout room and whiteboard. Now, if it's not possible, that you don't have any highly interactive features, you can also pair some of the technologies that you use with others, such as Mentimeters or Klaxoon is quite good, because you can use sticky notes and move them around. There is a whole range of technology that allows you to have fairly interactive whiteboards using a phone and pair the technology. But then that's another extra cost, and that's cost, and that's another thing that you need to onboard your trainers with. So sometimes less is more. Less technology. My advice is less technology is, especially at the start, is probably a good choice. Keep it simple for everybody. So anyway, thank you very much for your time today, and feel free to ask your questions, absolutely, and be in touch. I'm on Twitter, I'm on LinkedIn. I've got all the details there. And if you need any support, we do support all type of organizations with production support in multi-languages and different time zone. So that was what my marketing manager asked me to do. Thank you very much.
Brilliant. Right, let's go into some questions. That was great, thank you. And no, a little bit of a sales pitch at the end. I suggested that we do that, because one thing that we do is we work with partners. We call our partners friends of the consortium, and we have such a massive support network, and people do so much for us that the minimum that we try and do is somehow try and introduce our partners into members. Just before we go on to questions, there's some great questions here. What struck me since we've gone into lockdown is we're much more familiar with using this type of technology. But I'm still seeing some, being part of some webinars or virtual sessions where there's some very, very basic principles just people aren't adhering to them. And that was one of the reasons that we've been putting the books together, so the webinar book and the virtual classroom book. So some very, very, very simple things that I think we need to cover. We might come back to that, but in terms of some questions, okay, so let's just go to the top. So somebody suggested some business software. So what is a good maximum number of people within a virtual classroom?
I would say personally between 12 and 15. But it was a good use of breakout rooms. If you break them quite often in smaller group, 3 or 4 people, you can push it to 20. But it becomes very hard because some of them who are less vocal are probably going to disappear a little bit in the background.
Yeah, I was on a session. I'm part of an initiative that we've launched. And I think there were about 25, 30 of us using Zoom, and it worked really well with the breakout rooms. But of course, if you've got 30 people with 4 people into a room, what was taking a lot of time was then the feedback from each of the rooms. So it's not just the number of people, it's the time element that it has, isn't it?
And can I just jump onto that? Is that absolutely breakout are quite essential, but especially when you run a first breakout in a program, and maybe I'm getting into too much detail there, but you need to think about it's different from sending people in a face-to-face into a group where you actually give them the instruction and they gather around the table and that's it. You have to give 2 layers of instructions. You have to tell them what they're going to do in the breakout room. You have to tell them how to behave in the breakout room, how they're going to get there, mute yourself, turn on, whatever. So that takes a little bit longer, as you said. Then in some technology, the breakout room are not set up. So someone's going to have to get in the breakout room to upload the whiteboard and make sure they know how to write. So this takes another bit of time. And then after the breakout room, you need to actually go back into the main room and debrief. And if you don't do the debrief, then the learner-centered elements, so the fact that the ideas that's being discussed are valued. Otherwise, already the learners feel like it's dropped. So anyway, to cut a long story short, it means that a breakout activity, especially the first one, is going to be 30 to 45 minutes anyway. So it's something to keep in mind when you think about the time of a session.
Exactly, and the other thing is know your technology. Now, if it's the first time you're running a session using GoToMeeting or Zoom or something, you need to make sure that you absolutely know how to use it. So another question is, what do you mean by a whiteboard in a breakout room? How does that work?
Well, in a breakout room, you can use a slide or you ask your participant to upload a flip chart, and let me actually think, and then they actually can draw on it like this. Obviously, it's just can you see? So that's it's because it's a meeting tool here, we can't do it, but everybody can pretty much I'm not sure how to solve that, can type, write, or comment on the whiteboard. So it's actually a good brainstorming tool. So that's what I mean. I hope it makes sense.
Yeah, no, it does, and I love that. If you find me in a physical meeting room, then I either need a flip chart or a whiteboard to write on it, and getting everybody to then share ideas on that whiteboard. So again, that's a tip that go back, look at what software you're using, and learn how to use breakout rooms and whiteboards. Absolutely. A question from Stella. Stella, hi. I think you're in Brussels, aren't you, Stella, at the moment? What are your views on Adobe Connect as a platform?
I love it, but I'm very aware that it's used too much bandwidth and you can't have everybody on webcam, which at the moment is not ideal. We promised an upgrade for December where they're going to get rid of Flash, and the technology should replicate all this flexibility that's available in Adobe currently will still be available on this new way, or this new Adobe. So, hopefully it is going to happen, because I do think in terms of training it is a great tool. But at the moment, in a COVID environment, it is, and for some organizations, it's very costly. And it is also quite, it's not the easiest to get started with, especially for the trainers. So pros and cons.
Yeah, that's our experience, that it's quite difficult to get your head around it. We've been researching lots of different platforms recently, and there's one, I think it was called Livestream, that's meant to have really great breakout rooms and everything. And so there were 3 or 4 of us who are used to using this technology. We all jumped onto this live stream, and we couldn't fathom how to do anything. And so we were like, do you know what? When we first went onto Zoom or GoToMeeting for the first time, it's quite intuitive.
Yeah.
So again, it's trying to find something that is intuitive. Another one that we're looking at the moment is Blue Jeans, owned by Verizon, who's the equivalent of no, America's equivalent of BT, so big
Yeah.
organization, so should be secure. And they've got breakout rooms, so we're looking at that one. Another quick question: so how directive are you at the beginning about turning off all other programs?
Very. No, absolutely. Well, it is. I mean, and with people having technical issues, I actually, it's in the little book, but I always start with a set of instructions. So what you should be doing: turn off all the programs. Please be focused. And I've got an etiquette. It's something that I'm quite strong about. I've got an etiquette. So I've got a first slide when we start. I said, okay, I'm going to ask you to be focused. So turn off all applications. Concentrate, take part, and be polite, courteous anyway. And I ask people to physically give me a sign. So either it's in the chat, yes, I agree, or it's just, some of the little emoticons, the green tick or whatever. Give me a green tick if you agree, give me a red cross if you don't. And now, until everybody has confirmed that they agree, then I will not start the session.
Yeah.
So I'm going to be very directive about it. And if someone actually in the first few activities doesn't take part in the activities, I will remove them from the room on the pretense that clearly if they're not taking part, they've got a technical issue, so they need to restart their computer. Obviously, they're not multitasking.
Yeah, and we do, just the fact that we're in a virtual environment, we should work the same as if we're in a physical environment. So, another question, in your experience, which normal face-to-face workshop activities work well within a virtual environment?
Interestingly, it's counterintuitive. It's not the information-driven ones because it's dull. Okay, if you have someone pushing content, it is best you watch a YouTube video. Very often, it is as I said, the behavior ones. So how to give feedback, how to do this, even using a software. Randomly Excel. So where do you're showing a solution, said, okay, with the different interactive tools like the one that I've just shown, you can ask people to write on the actual screen. So I will not try to do it live because it's a bit heavy, but you can actually ask, okay, where do you want me to go next, and then ask them to point out where they should be going. So it is actually much more into the skill and competence. It can work, but you have to think a little bit. And if you're working with a subject matter expert, they will have to step back and think about not lecturing, which is quite hard.
So brilliant. I think we've gone through all the questions. I think that's great.
Excellent.
Somebody said, I just discovered a Remo. In fact, no, I wrote that. Somebody else was talking about Remo, and I discovered Remo yesterday. I don't know whether you've heard of that, Gaelle.
No, what is it?
So it's we're looking at for a virtual conference platform.
Okay,
So
cool.
it would integrate this. And Remo, from the snapshot that I saw yesterday, is imagine you have a room with tables in cabaret style, in the way that we would run an actual session when we do our members meeting. Well, you have that on screen, and you've got people, and you're actually putting people at tables. And so rather than putting them in breakout rooms, they're in separate tables, and so they're having conversations around their tables.
Actually, I don't know if you know Global. It's similar. So you're at the main table and then you move on to separate table, and it's quite interactive. I do think intellectually some organization are not quite ready to design for this kind of solution, though, but it's quite exciting.
Yeah, and I'm looking at it. So when we do our next virtual member meeting, so date for diaries, everybody, is the 17th of September. Interesting. One of our speakers, in fact, one of our speakers in the afternoon is Don Taylor, and if you don't know Don Taylor, you should. He's chair of the Learning Tech Conference, chair of LPI. He's we refer to him as the James Bond of our industry, but don't share that. And he's running a
He's got
session.
a great voice as well.
He's got the best voiceover voice ever, and he's running a session in the afternoon about running a great webinar. And in fact, on our video platform, Clear Lessons, we filmed him a couple of years ago, talking about how to run a great webinar. So we've definitely got some supporting content if people want to look more on the Clear Lessons platform. That's definitely worth having a look at. Oh, we've got another question. I was just about to sign off. We've got another question. I'm a minute over time, but that's okay. You mentioned virtual post-it notes. What
Yes.
piece of software was that?
Quite a few do it. I really like Klaxoon, and it's not just because they're French. Let me just type it in the chat. And I think Mentimeter as an element of it. Maybe someone can just confirm it. And they are quite loose. So Klaxoon. And then
Mentimeter is a great piece of software, and we use that within our members meetings, where it loads straight up onto the browser on your mobile phone, and you either ask on the board multiple choice questions. So we might have a question which is, which session do you want to go into when we split into a stream later on, but you can also have free text, and it then creates a word cloud, and it's brilliant.
But do Klaxoon, I think you can properly, but there are a lot of applications doing that, where you can actually type on your mobile phone, your post-it note in a certain color, and then it's going to go on certain part of the board, and the facilitator can change the color. It's quite powerful, but it is an extra layer of technology that your facilitator will have to actually onboard, if not physically as how knowing how to use it, because sometimes it's good to pair them with a technology person, but to actually get their mind around how to design a content with it. And that, I think that's the hardest part.
Yeah, and we've put a page. I think somebody put it in the chat earlier. We've actually put a page together on our website where there's a whole load of resources that we're recommending, just highlighting. And so if somebody can either post that in the chat again or go back and have a look in the chat. And so things like this, what we'll do, Gaelle, is we'll add these to our list of tools and resources that we think are good. Jamboard on Google is great too. Never heard of Jamboard. Do you know Jamboard?
Yes, I heard of it. I haven't tried it, but and quite a lot of them are highly interactive. So I think the Microsoft one, you can also to a certain extent use it, combine it in the virtual classroom as well. The name is just eluding me. But there are some really good tools out there, and it's a matter of finding them and really like owning them and making the best of them.
Yeah.
So sometimes just having a couple that works for you, not trying to have too many.
Exactly. Keep it simple and make it effective. Thanks, Susie. You've just put those links in the chat box for me. That's fantastic. So, Gaelle, I just want to say thank you so much for working with us today on this session, and also on the little book of virtual classrooms. I love it. It's my favorite one so far. So if you guys in the room, if you haven't got one, then go to the website, download it. It's digital, and the idea is, my role of bringing learning and development together with the charity sector. If you are a member of the consortium, that's great. We've designed it for you guys, but if you're not, that's fine too. Download it, use it, and share it with other people and other charities. It's all about how can we help and just raise the level of effectiveness within those organizations. So, Gaelle, thank you so much. If you want to stay on the line as everybody then disappears, then we can have a chat afterwards.
Yep.
So just I'd like to thank everybody for coming along and participating. Thank you so much, and see you on the 17th of September for our members meeting. Don't forget to register, and hope you guys are all doing okay in lockdown.
Thank you very much, Martin. Thank you for inviting me. And thank you, Susie. You're wonderful in webinars as well as an editor. So thank you very much, and have a lovely day, everybody.
Yeah, Susie just snuck in there and was just putting stuff in the chat room for us. It's funny because